Kevin Durant set to make his return and shake up the Western Conference, which is just a jumbled mess. Dallas Mavericks lose at home again. Where does that put them in this whole mix? We'll talk about that and then play our real or fake game with Trae Young and Quinn Snyder. Can they really lead Atlanta to a championship together at some point? It's all right now on the Locked On NBA podcast.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Every single day, and on Wednesday, it's us. We're back after a week off. I'm John Karalis. I host the Locked On Celtics podcast. You find me on Twitter at John_Karalis.
And I'm Jake Madison, host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast, on Twitter at Nola Jake, and I survived Mardi Gras.
You survived Mardi Gras. I survived an outing with Kendrick Perkins last week. So that's what I was doing.
Everybody wins.
Everybody wins. I go toe to toe with Kendrick Perkins. I came around and it's like, yeah, Mardi Gras is about the same, like combined just massiveness. That's good. I'm glad. Last week's show without us, just as good. So I guess it's the league that's interesting. But hey, we're gonna still try to talk some fun NBA basketball in a wild night in the NBA. Later on, real or fake, the Atlanta Hawks will go to the Eastern Conference. The Atlanta Hawks are trying to get back on track. Hiring Quinn Snyder, Trae Young is their cornerstone. Is that going to be anything productive? We'll play that real or fake game later on. Let's get to the Dallas Mavericks next and in the Western Conference, because I can't make heads or tails of this Western Conference right now. The Phoenix Suns are right there in a mix of them, the Clippers, the Warriors, the Mavs, the Timberwolves, the Jazz, the Pelicans, all within 3 games of one another. Oh, the Portland Trailblazers right there within 3 games. The Lakers, 4 games if you want to expand it to 4 games. So much happening here. But Kevin Durant's about to make his debut with the Phoenix Suns. So the Suns are 33-29. So they have about 20 games left here. Can they make a real run climb? Can they pass the Sacramento Kings, who have a 3.5 game lead on them? Can they pass Sacramento? Can they get into that top 3?
I think there's a chance of it. I do think there's a chance. You've seen Memphis, who's also above them, not play particularly great at times this season. So I think you could see Phoenix jump up a little bit. When you look at the Suns and kind of some of their issues for, say, the past month or so, there's been a couple questions about kind of their rotation, playing too many guys at times. You had Kevin Durant back into this mix, and you can kind of start focusing that, which is only going to make them better when it comes to the postseason. But if Memphis stumbles a little bit or the Sacramento Kings stumble a little bit, they could easily jump up past there. But I think the biggest thing for them is not getting into the top 3, right? It's just, cool, let's solidify our spot in the top 4, have home court advantage in the first round, and then that team's going to feel pretty confident going toe-to-toe with anybody, with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Chris Paul, Ayton, and the rest of the, whatever the rotation they decide is going to end up being. But this, avoids a matchup with one of those teams in the first round, and I think they're going to take that, all things considered.
Yeah, they are in such a crazy spot here because I can sit here and say, hey, look, you get KD in, and this debut is going to there is some acclimation, right? There is some kind of, hey, we got to figure out our timing, you just don't get in there and start dancing together. Somebody's going to step on somebody's feet. So that's going to take a little bit of time, but Booker is amazing. KD is KD. Chris Paul is the point guard. Feel like the process of doing that can be really short for them, but you disagree?
Oh, wait, go ahead. No, I'll jump in there after. Go ahead.
Okay. But I look at the West, and there's so many possibilities here. Steph Curry just worked out with the Santa Cruz Warriors. He's on his way back. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just, the years have conditioned me to always think the Warriors can figure it out. If it's Suns Warriors 4-5, that could be a one and done for the Suns. I trust the Warriors to figure out themselves in the playoffs more than the Clippers or the Mavericks or anybody else in that potential 5 spot. So it's the cohesion that the Warriors already have versus the Suns trying to kind of figure out if they become a little too much my turn, your turn, there is the potential for it not to gel perfectly right away.
Well, one of the things that might compound on that a little bit and, kind of stretch things out and maybe make that adjustment period longer than what you're expecting is I think Durant's going to be on a minutes restriction too. So he's not going to be getting kind of a full playoff allotment of minutes. So while they'll win those minutes, I'm sure he's going to be out there on the court and be fine with those. It's still going to throw you off, right? So if they do end up in a 4-5 matchup, it speaks more to your point of they still might be trying to figure out exactly how everything works. So the like minute detail of him playing whatever minutes allotment he's going to have. And does that throw something off? And in a playoff series where everything's kind of heightened and you need to be at your best, if you're at 95% versus 100, that might knock you out. And that might kind of end up with the Phoenix Suns going home against the right type of opponent, which I'm with you. The Warriors should be able to figure this out a little bit easier than the Suns because it's the same group of guys for the most part. They've had these guys all around. They kind of know what they need to do. And there's going to be some experimentation for the most part with the Phoenix Suns as Monty Williams dials everything in. So if you catch them at the wrong time or this takes a little bit longer, they could easily be beaten by the right team. I'm not going to say any team, but like a Warriors team, sure.
Absolutely. It has to be the right team. And defensively, you might see it more show up on the defensive end, which is, who's going to leave to double team? What's the strategy? What's the team's kind of style here? And how is Kevin Durant going to mix into that style? Is he going to be seamless? Is he going to have some mistakes where he's expecting help from a certain way and it doesn't come, and that leads to some layups or open shots? That's going to be, I think, where we might see it a little bit more often. The offensive side is something that maybe these guys are so good they can figure that out.
This should be fine there, yeah.
Putting a KD level guy in there who is, a better offensive player. How far across the league do you have to go to find a better offensive player than Devin Booker? Well, there you go. You found a guy that's right there. And so that puts an even worse defender on Chris Paul. And now that leaves him open to maybe make some plays. So I think offensively, there is a little bit of work that needs to be done, but that should be done quicker. The defensive side might be where it shows up a little bit more quickly.
Are you excited to see him in a Suns jersey and to see this?
It's going to be a little weird, man. I'll be honest with you. I knew that he wanted to go there, and it's just, I don't know, man.
I'm with you. It's going to look weird, right? Like it's going to look weird
for an old head like me. It is very reminiscent of Charles Barkley going to Phoenix and seeing Barkley in the Phoenix Suns uniform, and I'm like, this just does not look right at all. And KD has bounced around now, so he's now on team number 4, and I don't know, the Suns jersey just is going to look a little extra weird. But honestly, what the impact is on the West is going to be really the most interesting part, because Denver is basically the top seed. They've pretty much locked that up at this point. 5.5 lead with 20 or 19 games to go. Is that right? 19 for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a tough thing, even though Memphis ended up winning on Tuesday night. That's just too much. Memphis is too inconsistent. Where do the Kings go? Where do the Clippers go? Where do everything could be flipped on its head by the time we do the playoff preview. The Kings are sitting there as the 3rd seed. They could be the 5th seed when this is all done. So I really am curious to see the impact. How quickly can the Suns get this together? Can they go on a run and put a 7, 8, 9, 10 game winning streak together? That's going to be if they can do that, then they really become super, super dangerous, and it shakes up all the matchups, and it could change the entire course of the playoffs, because what used to be a favorable matchup for the Nuggets can now all of a sudden be, oh God, we got to play this team in the second round, and I don't want to see that. So That's going to be interesting.
Yeah. They can do that run, by the way. Like, I fully believe in like a 7-game winning streak or something for that team.
They can. Can the Mavericks? They had the other half of what happened in Brooklyn, and that's not going as great as they'd hope. And it was another tough loss to the Indiana Pacers in this one. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the rest of the West. We'll fold the Lakers in there because the Lakers are trying to get in there and make some noise as well. First, today's show brought to you by the good folks at FanDuel, our new sports book partner. It's America's #1 sports book. We're America's #1 sports podcasting network, so it's a perfect marriage. If you're a new customer to FanDuel, that's great. You're actually in a good spot because you get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So go download that FanDuel Sportsbook app. Safe, secure, super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to the point scores and three-pointers drained. Anything you want, you can do the same game parlay, combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout. It's all there at FanDuel. Do not miss the chance at your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's the important part. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Learn more there. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. We just ask you to please gamble responsibly. And we thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Stay on this feed. Check out Locked On Game to Game because there was a ton happening in the NBA. We can't get to all of it in this podcast, but Locked On Game to Game will get both sides of the story. Local hosts filling you in on all the nitty gritty. It's like you'll be at all of these games with everything that you're going to get on Locked On Game to Game. I'm very curious to go listen to Locked On Game to Game, Jake, and hear what Nick Angstead has to say about this Dallas Mavericks loss to the Indiana Pacers. Kyrie Irving had a chance, had a three-pointer to potentially win the game and missed. Lots of missed shots in this game. Benedict Mathurin missed 2 free throws to open up it's just a big back and forth. Let me start with this. Shout out to the Pacers because I just saw the Celtics beat the Pacers, but it was like 142-138. The Pacers are tough. They are a really tough team. They're I think out of it in the East. I don't think they're going to make the play-in, but credit to them. Dallas has now lost 2 in a row. They are in a tie basically with the Golden State Warriors. They potentially could enter the play-in tournament. What do you make so far of this Luka Kyrie partnership?
Not too great, right? And this is something that we've talked about on the show before that, not too great could really blow up in their faces given that he is a free agent at the end of this year and they're 1-5 in their last 6. That's really not a good spot to be in. And I agree with you. Indiana's pretty tough, right? There's some talent there. They can score. Halliburton's been awesome this year.
Right.
This still feels like a game that they should have won. And they almost did. They were down close to double digits and they really clawed back and got it within 2. But you saw a few kind of issues for him. And, one of them was offensively. When they were down 2 with 2 minutes left to go, they missed 5 threes in that stretch to take the lead and couldn't make any of that, including Kyrie's right at the end there. It feels like with Luka and Kyrie, you should be able to manufacture better shots than that. And that really wasn't quite the case for the Dallas Mavericks. There could have been better shot selection, a little bit more sort of structure or something in there to try and get the right kind of shot, especially if those shots aren't falling. And that's a little bit concerning to me, I think. And that's kind of like the biggest takeaway from that is like, you guys couldn't get 2. You couldn't get like a bucket here or there with Luka and Kyrie and both of them out there. One of the concerns we had about this team, right, is what are they going to look like defensively with both of those guys out there? But they really did get back in this game with good defense and started getting stops on Indiana and were forcing them into tough shots. But they just weren't able to convert it after a certain point on the other end. I think that if you're looking for like reasons to be optimistic, the fact that they were playing defense and getting stops against a pretty decent scoring team probably means they'll be fine in the long run. This one still stings though, especially on your own home court.
Yeah, they have to find ways. Like you can't lose to the Lakers the way you lost. You can't give up
No.
27-point lead to the Lakers. You just can't do that. You cannot let the Pacers, as good as they are, come into your home floor and beat you. That's not, at this point, like I said, you're fighting for playoff position. These games are all meaningful. And if you want to make a run in the West, you want to avoid some of these teams at the top. But hey, maybe or I say that instinctively, but maybe they don't. Jake, maybe they don't. Maybe the Mavericks are sitting there saying, hey, you know what? We're fine as the 7th seed because we don't believe in the Memphis Grizzlies. We're fine if we get to the 6 because Sacramento Kings. I feel good about the Sacramento Kings. Maybe the thing you don't want to be in the West right now is the 5th or the 8th seed. And if you're 6 or 7 in the West, you're fine because Memphis, no disrespect to Memphis, but the Grizzlies, can't win on the road, and all it takes is just stealing one on your floor, and the Grizzlies could be a shockingly early exit. Maybe the Mavs are just, I'm not saying they're intentionally losing these games, but maybe teams in the West are sitting there saying 6-7, we're fine. We're fine with that first round matchup.
You're literally speaking and acting out the dog drinking the coffee with the fire around him going, this is fine meme in this moment. Is like what you're doing, right? Like, and if that's what the Mavs are thinking, that is you're lying to yourself. That's trying to convince yourself that what's going on around you isn't actually burning to the ground. Not that things totally are around the Mavs, right? But if you're like, oh no, it's okay, we're not doing too good and we'll be in the play-in tournament. Like, no, that's not, they will take that. Don't get me wrong. They'll take that given where they are. But if you're telling yourself, if you are a Mavs fan and you're telling yourself that, oh man, you need to go see a therapist because I can see right through your fake bravado, which isn't even that much there, all things considered, because you're willing to accept the play-in tournament. And you need to go talk through your feelings and just be honest with yourself and stare in a mirror here. Maybe that's what the Mavs need to do. Maybe they need to be like, oh, we're actually not okay, and have some sort of team meeting and air it all out there. But look, you just had those quotes from Jason Kidd that were like, oh, I'm dealing with this in New Orleans right now, where sometimes the coach seems so unaware of what their issues are and their problems are. And it's like, I don't know, man, they're just trying to play basketball. And it's like, dude, you're the coach. Like you gotta get in charge of all of this stuff here. So, if you're saying that it's just you don't believe Jason Kidd can come up with the solutions, and given that he admitted he has zero solutions or answers, maybe this is the only way to think.
I'm just watching like you guys. I don't know, man. I'm sitting here. I'm sitting in the front row. They don't let me have a soda in the front row anymore. But like, yay, I'm just watching like you guys. Okay, but in all seriousness, Dallas. First of all, let me say this: they just got Maxi Kleber back. This is the first time that he was worked into the lineup.
Yes, that's big.
It's a big deal. This is a big deal. Maybe it just takes a little while. You got Kleber back. He's a defensive center. He's going to help with that. He's going to he already stepped in and made some plays. He's on a minutes restriction. You get him back to full strength, and maybe you feel better about yourself. But I'm telling you, if the standings stay where they are, Denver number 1, Memphis 2, Sacramento 3, Phoenix 4. Well, which matchups do you want? If you're below 5, if you're below the 4, if you're below 4 and you're like, I'm not going to get home court. We're not going to get home court. If you're sitting like the Mavs are just like I'm going to throw the Jazz out of this. I just don't think they're going to win.
I don't think no, I'm with you on that.
Okay. It's like Timberwolves, maybe.
Look here. Let's knock out the Lakers too. Let's knock them out and check them off our box in this segment. Lakers aren't making the postseason either with the LeBron injury. They lost.
Right. They lost in this game. Can we just because we watched that.
Cool. We're done.
Okay. We're done with that. Congratulations, Anthony Davis. You played well. I think the Lakers role players that they got are fine. They're just good enough to be competitive, but not good enough to win enough to get into the playoffs. That's our Lakers bit.
Cool.
The Mavs would love to get to 4. You're only a game and a half out of that. You want to get to home court, and that's your goal, right? That's your goal. But beyond that goal, if you can't get to 4, you definitely don't want to be 5. So that's where you say, okay, you're trying to manipulate a little bit. You don't want to be 8. You don't want to face the Nuggets. So 6, 7. This is where you want to be, either at home court or 6, 7.
Yeah, but one of those spots, the 7th, is you have to win an extra game and go in through the play-in tournament to get that, right? Like, so you're picking 6 because you are.
Yes,
look, if they're that confident, the basketball gods are going to come down so hard on them in the play-in tournament, and just the karma would be like chef's kiss on that. So, like, no, come on, it's not like, do you want to be 6 or 7? You want to be 6 because you don't have to go through the play-in tournament to get there. Like, this isn't a question, John.
No, you're right. But also, you don't want to be 8. You don't want to be 8, right?
No,
you want to be 6.
You want to be 6. You want to be 6. Like, sure,
6.
5 or 6, probably 6, and take your chances on like
that
not
play-in
the Suns.
tournament. If you get into that play-in tournament, you better win the damn thing so you can get to 7. Because those are you know what? And in 2 weeks,
but it depends on where they are. Like, it depends on where they are, right?
Yeah. All of a sudden, in 2 weeks, you may be like, "Oh my God, the Suns made a run. We don't want to be 6 anymore.
It's too early to manipulate like standings and to lose and rest some guys to lose. Like, that's the final 5 games you do that. Maybe.
I think the point of everything I'm saying is it's just such a mess in the West right now with so many teams in a bunch. Let's like saying getting the 7th seed is actually not bad in the West right now. You can actually talk yourself into that and saying, well, hey, Memphis, not a good road team. Maybe you can get to 7 games. I don't know. All right, let's go to the East. Can we go to the East? Let's just roll through and talk about the Atlanta Hawks. Right. By the way, if you want to get more on all of these teams, Locked On NBA Network, every team is covered. I suggest you go through Locked On Mavs. I want to hear what Nick Angstead has to say about all of this. That's great shows up and down the league. Locked On Hawks is going to be talking about Trae Young, Quinn Snyder. Quinn Snyder made his debut, and they lost. The Atlanta Hawks lost to the Washington Wizards, so that's not great for the Atlanta Hawks. The Wizards are trailing, our team that's 20. Well, they were 28-32 coming into this. The Hawks have high hopes. You fire your coach at this point, hoping to get a bump and get a run so you can climb in the standings. They have the potential to get up to 6. They have an outside shot at, I don't know if 5 is going to happen. They're 13. They're 4.5 games out of the 5th seed. They're 3.5 games out of the 6th seed. There's a chance with Brooklyn, who's in 6th, kind of, in whatever free fall they're in or whatever. But Trae Young missed 2 3-pointers that could have tied the game at the end of this. Wide open, good looks, and the question here, Jake, as we play our weekly real or fake game, the Atlanta Hawks can, in this partnership with Trae Young and Quinn Snyder, can build a championship level team. Real or fake?
Fake? I think it's fake. I think this one's pretty easily fake too. Dear listeners, do you think that Trae Young is better than Donovan Mitchell? Because I don't. And Quinn Snyder and Donovan Mitchell, with Rudy Gobert, a defensive force, weren't able to get it done in Utah. So I just see no reason to believe that he's going to get it done with like a worse player than that. And at a certain point in time, we probably need to have a discussion about Trae Young and if his style of play can kind of lead to winning, right? Like, this is a guy who's going to average over 25 points per game, 10 assists, put up some incredible numbers, and isn't going to be doing anything for the second consecutive year for the most part, right? Like, when do we start talking about kind of like empty stats with him, which maybe needs to happen a little bit?
Oh, I'm ready to have that discussion. I am very ready to have that discussion. First of all, let's have the discussion of the perception of Trae Young as some great shooter, which I think we need to get past that, right? I don't know. Do you feel like there's the perception out there? Because I feel like people see Trae Young, they're like, oh, don't leave him open from three.
So his shooting percentages from three are not as good as you think. Like people think he's like a 40% shooter from three, and he's not. And usually when I tell that to people, shooting 32.7% from three this season, right? He's a career. I have him up. He's a career 35% shooter. Like, it's not good. It's not horrible, but it's not good, right? It's barely acceptable here. He does it on volume, which is big, right? So here's the thing with him. It's twofold on that. He has court gravity, and that's important. You might not be a good shooter, but if you draw a defender out to you, that's almost the same thing at times to open it up for others in theory, like Murray and some of the other players they have. That does that. His willingness to shoot from like 30 feet, I think, is also good. You got to throw a defender on him that far away. So he's good for spacing the court, but is that good enough to be your primary guy? Probably not, right? There's a reason you like the idea of Buddy Hield out there shooting threes way more than Trae Young, because, hey, cool, he's not your primary scorer, and we're not running the majority of our offense from him. So, yeah, he has the same court gravity, but he's not just constantly bricking shot after shot after shot. So, yes, like, I'm with you and I'm not with you, but more with you.
Yeah. I mean, at some point you say, I'm not guarding him from 30 plus feet. I'm not. Okay, he can make one, maybe. He's not going to go Steph. I don't think that Trae Young pulling up from 30 something feet, like, maybe that'll beat you once. And if you're the unfortunate team that happens to, then that sucks. But generally, as a league, I just don't think, you want to pull up from the logo, Trae? Go for it. Go for it. You're just not, there are certainly plenty of YouTube highlights of him hitting the deep shot, but I'd rather have Trae Young bombing that shot away and trying to find his range from there than trying to get any level of offense going, for the rest of his team. And which is rough to say for a guy that averages 10 assists, but I just don't see the shooting being something that you have to worry about right now. He's had one good shooting season where he shot like 38%. That's his best shooting season. He's had one decent one where he shot 36%. Everything else has been average or below average. So average or below average, one slight above average season, and one good shooting season. In what, 5-6 years at this point? Like, the book is out on him. He's not a good shooter. I don't think, and look, I've said this on this podcast before. I got turned off the Hawks in a big, big way last season when they came in after their big conference finals run and said, we're bored. Basically, they said, we're bored with the regular season, saying like, it's tough to get up for these games when you've been through the playoffs. Instead of saying, we got a taste of the playoffs and we're itching and we want to come in and build those habits and really work towards something. They're like, this is boring now. You're like, dude, you ain't done nothing to have that attitude. And so that has turned me off. Now, Lloyd Pierce, gone. Nate McMillan, gone. So I'm looking at Trae Young as like, attitude's not right, man. Your attitude's not in the right place. I don't like the way he approached the regular season last season. I think there was a little bit of that this season. The coaching thing, that's two coaches, that's two heads that you've got rolled. That third one, like, if Quinn Snyder is gone after 2 or 3 seasons, then forget it. Like, this has to happen. And by the way, the answer to me is fake. I'm so out on the Atlanta Hawks. So out on the Atlanta Hawks. I think you got that.
I thought you might say it was real there, that they could win a title
with
those guys.
Jake, I'm on board.
One of the things that's also interesting with them, right, is how much more ability do they have to retool the roster after trading all those pieces away to get Deontay Murray. And then there's like you have John Collins, who's just never actually been traded. So I'm assuming there's no real good offers out there for them to accept, given how often he's been in there. So he's clogging up part of their salary cap, right? There's just not, I think, a ton of avenues for them to be like, let's build a true roster that we really like, a true contender here. That's part of the problem too, right? Yeah, it has to do with Trae Young, has to do with Quinn Snyder too, but also like, what are the avenues for them to get better? And
go ahead.
Not a ton.
Yeah, I think that's why you hire Quinn Snyder. I think that's what that was about.
Yeah.
I think that what you're saying.
Get the most of the guys you have here.
That's the admission. The admission is, all right, this is kind of like, you can still make trades. You can still package guys. You can still figure things out, and try to tweak and hopefully you can get exceptions and use those to tinker around the edges. But you hire Quinn Snyder because he is a guy that can get a lot out of his players. Now, can he get enough? I don't know. I mean, the Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert situation, that's just a personality thing. And maybe Quinn Snyder can get more out of his personalities in Atlanta than he could in Utah. I mean, in terms of getting them over the hump. I just don't think that the coaching is going to have that much of an impact. But it is up to Snyder to get Trae Young to be like, to get Trae to understand who he is and get that attitude right. If Trae Young can get that attitude right and get a little effort on defense, just a tiny bit of effort on defense, then maybe you got something there. Maybe. But at this point, I'm so out on Atlanta that I'm going to need to see a full season of effort and execution and buy-in before I can say, all right, I think maybe, because Trae is young enough to have learned from this and change. I'm not writing him off. I'm just saying that if he doesn't change, then I think next season you're going to see a lot of people turning on Trae Young.
Would not surprise me in the slightest.
All right. Well, we're going to turn off this podcast. We're turning up now. There's no. No, I didn't have it there.
Close. Almost
so close.
There.
That was me firing from 30 like Trae Young and missing. Is what that was. Oh,
way to tie it all together.
I'll find it somewhere, man. I'll find it somewhere. Hey, thanks everybody for listening to the podcast. Really appreciate everybody making this your first listen of the day. Locked On NBA. It's great. It's a great show with all of the different hosts we have on here. Nick Angstead, Pat the Designer. Tomorrow, they always have a fun time. And I'm sure they'll get more into some Mav stuff tomorrow. Want to thank everybody on Wednesdays. It's us. I'm John Karalis, host of the Locked On Celtics podcast, and on Twitter at John_Karalis.
And I'm Jake Madison, host of Locked On Pelicans, on Twitter at NolaJake.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Get into that comment section on the YouTube page. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you think about the Atlanta Hawks. Am I on point? Am I not? Is Jake on point? Is he not? What do you think? What do you think about the Suns? What do you think about the Mavs? All of that. Tell us. Get into those conversations in the comment section and share the podcast. Tell your friends and family they should be watching and listening to the Locked On NBA podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.